Hey everybody, how you doing today? For today, we're going to talk about restuffing this electrolytic capacitor, which is, probably the most important thing you have to do on these things. Those cans generally, they have a dielectric fluid inside of them, and they last maybe 20 years, 30 years at most. Given that this scope is from 1958, you can be pretty sure it's dried up. So we're gonna talk about how we go about replacing it. If you take a look there, you can see it's basically 420s at 450 volts, so it's a multi-cap. And if you look at the schematic, you'll see that this is the general area that we're talking about here. So there's 420s, 20, 20, 20, and you'll see there's a plus and minus, so it shows you, and you'll see those symbols, which we'll get to in a second, what they mean. Okay? But before we start ripping anything out, which is always the fun part, it's always important to understand what you're going to take out. So you'll see here, let me put some better light. So you'll see that there's a couple of resistors here. If you look at the schematic again, you'll see that there's a 22K, a 220K, and a 22K again. So there's three resistors on the schematic. And if you look here, you'll notice that this one right here is 22K. Sorry. This one is 22K by the bands, and this one over here is 220K. So that's kind of orienting it to the schematic. Now, how do you get rid of this stuff, right? So we also have wires that go here, and you can take pictures. A lot of people take pictures of things, but it's more advantageous for you to mark the wires that you're disconnecting. You always have the schematic to fall back on, but what you don't want to do is just go in there and start ripping out wires and then figuring it out later. So what I do, I found a pretty good way to get around this, is I use these labels. And, basically these are just stick-on labels, and it helps me to, mark things as I'm touching them. So I'll put one on the frame here by the terminal. I'll put one on the wire so that I know when I connect this thing back up, I know exactly where everything has to be connected. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this up with those letter designators, and then I'll come back. Thanks. So as you can see here, I've labeled basically everything that goes to this electrolytic capacitor. It's overkill. I normally don't do this for everything, but I'm showing you a technique that you can use. So you'll see this particular electrolytic has four connections. So I've got A, B, C, and D. And everything that ties off of A, I've labeled. So I have A on this side of the resistor, which is a 22K resistor. And then I have a wire that goes out of A and goes over to D on the schematic, which is right here. There you go. So there's D. So here's the A that I just showed you, and it comes up, goes to this 22K resistor, and then there's a lead that goes out to here. Same thing is true for B. B is a 220K resistor that goes here, and it goes over to D. And there's also a wire that comes out of B and goes over to the B side, right here. And the same thing for C and D. So basically what I can do is I can cut these resistors out, because I'm not going to reuse them. I can cut the wires, and you'll see I have the wires labeled, right? Here's the A wire, here's the B wire, here's a D wire in here, and there's a C wire, and I'll know exactly what they go to based on these classifications. It's the simplest way to do it, and of course I'm always going to double check my work on the schematic. But that's one way to cut this stuff out and make sure you put things back in the right place. You'll notice the ground on this thing is occurring through this ring right here, and when I put these, when I stuff the can with the capacitors, we'll make sure we ground things as well. So there's four 20 microfarad capacitors in this thing. I'm going to replace them with these four 22 microfarad capacitors. They're at 450 volts. Same thing as the can that's there. So I'm going to go ahead and desolder this stuff, get the can out of there and get it going. Thanks. Okay, so the can has been removed, and as you can see, I've restuffed it. I have four 22 microfarad 450 volt caps stuffed in the can, and a couple of things to go over on this one. So my intention was to put the cover of the can back on, but obviously it will not fit. So when I was going through this, the contacts that came out of the bottom were bad. My fault. I didn't plan ahead. So what I ended up having to do is run these wires through the bottom, and you'll see I've got the pigtail loops on them. I've got hot glue down here holding everything in place, and this is very, very solid. And you'll see I have heat shrink and I have liquid tape on here. And then my challenge is going to be to get this back in, upside down, it goes in here, and connect everything. So what do you ask yourself? You say, well, oh boy, how am I going to do that? No, that's the best part of this. It's fun, trying to figure out how you're going to get this done. So I'll have to give us some thought about how I'm going to work on that bottom to make sure I have something that can be easily serviced later by someone and that looks neat and is safe. So that's where I'm going to go now. I'm going to start thinking about how I'm going to connect those resistors, the 22K and the 220K resistors, as well as the wires that I have labeled here. All right, remember we labeled them in the last one? So that's where I'm going to go now. I'll come back when I have a solution and I'll show you what it looks like. Thanks. Okay, we have a solution, Houston. So I've taken the bottom of that cap can that I restuffed and I've made it neat, and I want to show you what I did. Here's what we have. Interesting, huh? So what I did was I took some terminal connectors. I trimmed down those copper wires that I had with the pigtails down. I bent them over. I crimped those connectors on and then soldered them on. And then this wire that you see here is the ground coming from the top of all these cans. So what I'll do is when I mount this up in here, in this area right here, I'll mount the ground connection right here. So you'll see it's very neat. I should be able to solder all of the resistors and the connections to these wires. I'll make sure I put some liquid tape on it possibly when I'm done, or some heat shrink tube. I have to take a look at that. But you'll see that I've taken something that, you know, I screwed up and turned it into something that that works. What I'll end up doing is putting a cardboard tube over this once I put it in the can, put it on the chassis. But this is very, very solid. Doesn't move. Okay, everything's connected. I've ohmed it out between the connector and back to the caps, so I know all my connections are good. And I'm going to go ahead and mount this, and then I'll show you where we go from there. Thanks. Okay, the can's been mounted, and you could get a really good look how neat that looks now compared to what it was before. So now I'm going to go ahead and reattach the wires and the resistors, and I'll come back and show you what that looks like. Okay? Okay, folks, problem solved. So we've got everything connected correctly. You'll see that my my little terminal solution worked out well. And just to show you, this is what I used. Pulled back the insulation, got everything nice connected cleanly, all soldered well. I've cleaned all the joints with rubbing alcohol and a stiff brush, and that problem's been solved. Next step that I'm going to do here is I'm going to need to replace these 20 microfarad caps and these 0.1s. I'm going to use the pigtail method on these. I'm going to snip them off here, pigtail them, and then put the new components inside and make a nice clean joint. And the reason why I'm going to do that is if you look at the solder on this board, clearly it was done by someone who didn't know how to solder very well. So I'm not going to disturb any of this. I'm going to make sure I use these joints to do the connections. I'm also waiting for these 0.1s to come in. I've ordered 2,000 volt versions of these, so I'm not going to power anything up until these are replaced, and this is the pi filter. So next thing I'll do in the next video is going to be going through these capacitors, changing them out. And just one last thing I want to show you on this. I'm going to flip this over with one hand here, so bear with me. This is what our can looks like. And I've created this piece of tubing, and you can see I've got glue on there drying. And I've also labeled what's in the can and when I restuffed it. And this is going to end up fitting right over here. And that's how that's going to look. So so that's the story. Anyway, I'm going to pull this can off here and let it dry correctly, and that's where we're going to end up. So be back with the next version of this when we start changing out those caps. Thanks. By the way, one other thing I want to cover on this, the can here that we've got, You know, I want to just make a point here. I don't have to put that cardboard there. I could just leave it alone, or I could have mounted the capacitors underneath. You know, I could have just done the easy way out, but half the joy of restoring these things is, you know, taking care of them and bringing them back. Someone threw this in a dumpster, and that's what they thought about it, and this is really a piece of vintage equipment. So for me, it's really important to take the time to try to bring it back to something that's presentable. You know, I'll probably never live long enough for those caps to go bad, but if someone inherits this and does this, they'll look at this and go, okay, this thing was restored in 2016, and hopefully they'll look at the work and say it was done very well. So that's the point. It's about satisfaction, and the satisfaction isn't just turning it on, it's about making sure it's done correctly. Anyway, thanks.